Welcome, Susan Harper. We are in Amsterdam today to do this interview for the Continuum Teachers Association, the CTA. And it's an honor to have this moment together so we can talk about Continuum, but not only. Your own involvement, your own experience, where this work and this inquiry brought you today, and also what you are opening in front of us and in front of the followers that are coming as well. So just in a few words, so you've been a very important key to the development of Continuum with Emilie Conrad. Would you like to give us just the sparkly moment of this meeting?
Meeting with Emilie?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was so fortunate. My mother talked me into doing my first workshop with Emilie, 5-day workshop in Tucson, Arizona, in January of 1975. Yeah. And I was like, Mom, I can't do a dance workshop. I don't know how to do steps and keep a count. And she said, no, it's something very different. She said, it's very strange and kind of shamanic, and I think you'll like it. So off I went, and indeed I did. It was so powerful to meet Emilie. I don't think I had ever met a woman with so much passion and vitality and own kind of thinking, like truly in her own stream of invention, innovation. And that was so powerful for me to witness a woman alive with like a way of listening to something that was somehow behind, underneath, coming through, and writing like a very profound stream of creative motion.
How old were you at that time, and what, a girl or a young woman?
Yes, 24 and a half years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what was your longing at this time, and how can we put this in perspective, for instance, with today? What was the road that you could see in front of you?
I had a longing really from childhood that I always knew there was more. There was just simply more to being alive, being human, but I hadn't found any creative process yet that was the one that would help open me. And in that context, which I didn't even think I was a mover, suddenly I found this huge creative invitation for my own particular medicine to start to come through, to really bloom. And it was such a rich context that pretty much everybody that was in it had that experience. Even though we were all moving together in a variety of ways, each one felt like their own unique passion and perspective flowering of sorts was occurring. I was 24 and a half. Young, I didn't yet have a creative process, but I had a longing for the more, like there has to be more mystery, more dimensionality. And in some ways I would say that's still a key for anybody who comes into Continuum and other kinds of creative processes. There's somehow a longing for a deeper, richer, more dimensional experience of being alive.
And at this time, was it something like a spiritual quest or like a mystical quest even? Or it was...
Yes, yes. I didn't know that I had that exactly, but as I was in the movement, and it was a form of prayer in movement in a way. It wasn't necessarily framed that way, but the feeling of touching that deep state of belonging that touches the longing. So for all my life, and for what I see in most people who get involved, that there's I'm making this little sign of the caduceus, the two snakes of longing and belonging, and how we deeply belong how we even have to belong more deeply to that which belongs us. The way the earth includes us, belongs us, the space belongs us. But each of us, have to make a journey to actually know ourselves to be that, to know the interconnectedness and to know the fundamental spiritual or mystical connection. And for all artists, there's a kind of restless something that's kind of calling, like you're never quite satisfied, you're never done. It's like something is just always calling you further, like the next discovery. And whenever a discovery is happening, it's so satisfying. And there's something like so deeply like, oh, I'm tasting what I've been longing for, and then the next one arrives.
And I guess, at this time, or when you're in your 20s and you have this call for knowing the bigger picture, so you go to India maybe, or you go on a trip somewhere, how can you talk about the call of the body? Because it seems that this call didn't come out of an external something, but that there was some kind of intuition or sense that the way in was through your body and through movement, which I think is pretty unique at that time, but also still now, I think, except for dancers or people who use a form of movement as an expression which is often already there, part of a culture, like all kind of different dances. But when it comes from something that seems very profound.
Yeah. So I would say that there's such a depth of interiority to experience one's own organism so dimensionally, or as a means, like our complexity of our nervous system, the sensitivity of it, is to be able to really perceive and be with the mystery, in fact. But most people live in a cultural body where they're very busy doing mostly this kind of stuff these days, and not having a richness of the interior. So there's people who have like a rich dream life or psychological life or poetic life. And in our work, we're going in, and inside is a rich dimensional experience of so many different movements, flavors, feelings, sounds, breaths, and there's a kind of stream. And we're touching a stream that's both very, very ancient, primordial, deep primordial knowing, and very fresh simultaneously, like immediate, and something that you've not ever quite touched before. And you're not learning it by somebody commanding or manipulating or giving you steps or telling you to contract this or that. It's an ongoing discovery process. And so the inner experience of deep, profound connection to that which actually is, but also to that which is becoming, that which is emergent, that which is arriving, and how to feel that, touch that.
It's fantastic and so beautiful and profound how you speak about that now also. But at that time, did you have words, or how did those first experiences happen, and how they were captivating a sense of what was going on?
So I didn't have language, for sure not, when I was first meeting Emilie. And I can remember Emilie was so articulate on so many different levels, thinking of many different ways. And so I used to come and sit in her office as she would counsel different people. They would come and ask her a question, and she'd say, "Is there anything you want?" And I'd say, "No, I just want to listen." And then she would give a short talk, not such a long talk, before one of our movement dives. And I remember one day in particular, she talked about the unfolding of the planet, the planetary unfolding, the consciousness of the planetary unfolding. And Michael Stearns, who I then was married to in those years, was the live musician for Continuum at the time. And when the dancing time came, the open movement time came, there was an energy that all of us were riding, and it was as if the words of Emilie had stirred a kind of meaning pot inside each one of us, and there was a feeling of catching like such a big wave that all of us were riding on in that moment. And Michael made a piece of music that he later called Planetary Unfolding. But there was that feeling of, he was bringing it through in music, and Emilie was bringing it through just in her movement. And all of us were finding something in the movement, like a big sea that every one of us was riding on. And it was a way of feeling how the invisible is suddenly becoming visible. It's becoming tangible. It's becoming like ripples of movement and gesture and traveling through the face and the neck and that current, like that feeling of riding currents with each other, like so exciting, a co-creative moment. And in it, then that experience, it's spiritual, it's creative, it has full of eros, it's like sensuous, pleasurable, exciting, like that place of deep improvisation where you're being so guided, but everyone is also doing their part of being in the creative play. Yeah.
And do you feel now that at that time you were pioneering a new path for dance, for healing, probably expression?
We were so clear that it was pioneering. For all of us, it was pioneering. I mean, Emilie was truly pioneering, like a sensibility that was opening, and there were movements coming, like the video that's known from me of my back, the undulation and stuff, all through the chest as well. It was movements that you'd never seen culturally anywhere. You could see movement like in the pelvis, you could see a certain kind of belly dancing, you could see a certain ripple in Africa, but somebody lying on the ground and literally becoming the ocean. Just the sea pouring through every possible direction. We'd never seen any movement like it. And so there was a moment for each of us when a new movement would be arriving in the field of what was happening in the room, and just the hairs are up on the back. You're just like, wow, like what is happening? There's such a feeling of the guidance of the larger creative force or creative flux, but you have somehow access to it. At the same time, it's always a state of grace. You can't just go, okay, I'm gonna like make the mystery happen. You can't like try to work the mystery. You have to let the mystery work you.
Yes.
Yeah, but be available for.
Yes. And was a mystery there already, or was or did it come later in how did it work, the placement of the mystery in the development of the early stage of Continuum?
It was always somehow, we not yet mystery school, but the sense or the appreciation of mystery, in that sense, the appreciation of the unknown. Like that was always the quest, really, was how do we come past the habits? And we're so habitually organized. I mean, we learn so quickly how to whatever it is you're going to do, whatever movements you're doing, how you walk, how you talk, how you eat, everything. So how do you keep going beyond your habit? And as long as you're living in habit, it's a kind of invisible prison that keeps you in a known universe. So part of the inquiry is, how do we listen for, feel, sense something that's not so easy to sense, because our brain recognizes what we already know.
Yeah.
So how do you listen for something more, like kind of almost imperceptible? Another little movement, a sound, a way of playing in the breath, a little something that's wanting to flower in. Yeah. It's a little bit like before there were flowers on the planet. There were all these green plants, but no flowers yet. And however long it took for the planetary body to dream its way into the first flower. And then that first flowering, it's is such a great idea that it spreads like wildfire everywhere, right? And then it's variation, 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 variation. And it's the same. You get a new kind of ripple of movement, and then variation, 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 and then sometimes you're so still, and something is coming. And in that stillness, there's like another prototype of something that's never existed before, that's now starting to make its way. And it makes its way uniquely through each person. So we're not trying to make duplicates in any way, but rather help create the context, the fertility that lets each one find the particular flowering or tone or sensibility that's right for each one. Yeah. And it's just like we live now in modern times in a more consumer culture, but it's a complete opposite mistake. We're each meant to be offering our gift, not consuming all the gifts of the planet, right?
Yes.
And most people are, because they're not in touch with their own creative life, are then consuming because there's a longing and it's a confusion. It's like false longing for what one is really longing for is both the deep connectedness, but also one's unique expressivity in whatever medium, in whatever way is somebody's medicine. People need to find what that is to have a meaningful, full of meaning life.
Yeah. It sounds that at that time, Emilie and you did create a context, so an embodiment of these living principles that I'm sure are really much part of the daily life of indigenous cultures, or they are just a normal communication, a normal being part of it, just as an equal spreading of life forms and consciousness communicating at all time. But obviously it seems we got a bit lost in that. But it seems like at that time there was an opportunity to really plant a seed of that type of recognition that we are part of a larger process, for sure.
That's it.
But also to embody that, which is I'm very interested with and we are all very interested with the term embodiment, because it's such now a key word in so many ways, because it really brings a lot of our beingness into the body, and or taking the body into consideration. So
embodiment. So one thing is, you're speaking like the way in which in an improvisation, in movement, one could touch almost any creature that's ever lived, expressed itself on this planet, and touch something of it. In movement, you can suddenly find that whole four-legged, the swimming fin, the flight, those qualities, the snaking, the octopus, and its like movement. You can touch the flavor of the like the energetic signature that then would give rise to the embodiment of an octopus, or give rise to the embodiment of jellyfish, or give rise to the embodiment of a dragon, give rise. And then similarly, like over the years, sometimes when I would be in just really open movement, bigger movement, people would say, oh, you must have studied African dance, or you've studied India dance, or you've studied salsa. I'm like, no. But in the whole range of movement, those frequencies that become a dance style, they first start out as someone's improvisation. Every single one. Mudras, they're first someone's spiritual experience being in energy, and suddenly there's a mudra there. And then we get taught the form. Yeah. But originally, every single kind of movement that's ever come in has come in like from that larger creative sensibility. And then it manifests into myriad forms of bodies, right? And so as a mover, we can, through embodiment, touch the intelligence that gives rise to all of these forms of expression. And to be able to listen to it and not be so identified with our own Western human 21st century cultural frames. How do we keep going wider, bigger than that? Yeah. Sometimes people are in embodiment, but they're still so much in the cultural body.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting nuance there.
Because sometimes, like a certain athlete, and somebody will say, oh, that person's so embodied. But when I see them, I think, no, they have the agency part, they have the muscular part, the movement part with grace, but I don't see them necessarily feeling and dimensionalizing their experience. They've got the action, but not necessarily the embodiment of the interior sensibility, sensuality, eros, of actually feeling all the moves. Where are they really?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have another question about that for you, about this embodiment. Do you have a sense that we are talking about consciousness actually when you talk about embodiment? And then what is consciousness? Or are they different consciousness that we embody with?
Yeah. Well, of course, what is consciousness is a very big subject with a lot of opinions these days about that. There's no doubt in my mind that we're looking at a simultaneity of movement and consciousness. It's always completely together. And what you're seeing in a way is the openness of someone's mind, actually. And our capacity to be truly open, spacious, open for consciousness, for intelligence, for perceiving to occur. So in one sense, like the consciousness with which someone moves, they could have a really beautiful, graceful movement capacity, but may not be in that depth of experience. And when the depth of experience is there, then you have like a total congruency between the deep sensing movement, the agency part movement, and consciousness as part of a stream that's both personal and impersonal. Yeah. And so part of embodiment also is the recognition of each of the elements, elemental intelligences inside of each one of us, and how they're uniquely operating. Yeah.
And so do you feel that embodiment is in a way part of our current evolution in some ways? And if there, from Emilie, we know that she could see different direction or venue for it, like which could go through embodiment, but could go also almost to an out-of-body future, like an artificial way of still being a body, but which is totally the opposite of consciousness, because it's not the same consciousness, at least in a robot or in a kind of mechanic part than in living tissues.
Yeah, that misses the immediacy of interaction, responsiveness to context. So a deeply embodied human being is awake to the entirety of context and is learning with and from and responsive to. So we know that all of us are composed of the intelligence of water and fire and earth and air and space. And that deep primordial intelligence that's shaping into our shaping at every given moment, our consciousness of that, and then our ability to be so immediate in responding to what's actually occurring, what's coming in, and to an invisible, we could say, kind of realm of imagination, deep embodied imagination. So the capacity to be like the space that the planetary body does its dreaming inside of for each one of us. And for us to keep tapping like enormity of intelligence already operating inside the fecundness of space itself. Yeah. And so it's weird, it's an evolution in one sense, and in another sense it's like we're going back to former, earlier peoples who lived in a primal way, like understanding plants, understanding the medicine gifts from the earth that's already giving rise to us. One of my sweat lodge teachers, he was talking with his Native American elder, and he was saying it's so sad, all the rituals, the immensity of rituals that are being lost, Native American wisdoms. And his Native American teacher said, it all comes from the earth. It comes from the fire. It comes from the water. It comes from the elements by themselves. If they all get lost, when people return to knowing themselves as an expression of, then the ritual that's needed in the moment will reappear. It will show itself. And so it's like an understanding about how do each one of us gain and develop a deep, interconnected, wise knowing, so that we're guided in our particular responsiveness to the immediacy of these times, but at the same time, we're touching ancient knowing, and we're touching the fresh not knowing simultaneously. And that's the art in Continuum and other creative arts, is how do you ride at that threshold of everything you've ever learned, everything that you deeply somehow intuitively know, and then how do you simultaneously just become so empty, spacious, quiet, listening, available for what is not yet to appear, to be felt, to be become palpable. And that's the creative process, whether it's in music, in movement, in art. It's like the first artist that makes perspective.
The creative manifestation and materialization of the creative potential.
Yes.
And I just want to go back to something you said. It makes us also very much part, and it gives of what actually is manifested in our reality. It makes us also co-creator of really in the sense of taking the responsibility of our own creative potential, to be in this position, to realize that this particular place that you're speaking to.
It's deep responsibility, really. Yeah. It's the responsibility in a way to free our stream, to free our own streaming. Like the streamings are always ongoing, the streaming is happening. And then our stream gets cultivated in our family of origin, in our culture, along certain lines. We build canals, we build mechanical mediums, and then there's a process to free the stream in a way, to free the stream. And when I free a streaming in me, I free it for others instantly. And then the responsibility of the co-creative moment, like we're in a conversation right now, and so that depends on a deep level of listening. Like you're listening to me at a variety of levels, I can feel that. And I'm listening to you, and then there's like a kind of larger listening going on, and we're like, what is it that actually wants to be known right now? What wants to be said? And though there's a co-creation in any good conversation, like the best conversations are where there is a depth of listening, expressivity, what is that? And then we go to a new place and we're all of a sudden can feel like a new insight is happening.
Yes, yes. There is something about the somatic art or embodiment or these new, relatively new words that are part now of our Western societies And to me, they speak of this possibility of the choice we have to have an entrance into, to tap into this responsibility. And that comes first through the body and through sensation and through understanding that we are part of this larger context that you are speaking of. And somehow that this whole movement of moving through the body or giving it a place that's not an object, that's not a working thing to create richness or wealth or and that's a kind of a unique, also very positive opportunity that we may seize or not.
I think we have a great opportunity, because this work, from the very beginning of it, was a way of understanding body as process, not object, not commodity thinking, not this is an object that I will command, manipulate to do. Rather, to understand this organism, trillions of processes, intelligent processes, connected, interconnected to the whole planet, to the universe, interconnected process orientation. And that brings us to a kind of perspective of body of relating, not body as object, but that every little tiny moment of relating and interrelating, whether it's subconscious, like the way that the breath comes from the green ones, I don't have to be conscious about it. It's happening. Every single in-breath and every single out-breath. Intelligence of forming and dissolving is occurring. Every single moment, moment by moment by moment by moment. And so to have a sensuous, felt sense experience of that process way, or another way to say it is that it's all events. There's no actual noun, even though our language structures us that way. And it's because it works that way, we then think there's an I, a self, and a body, and that it's then has to take a verb, whereas this is itself an event and filled with thousands and thousands of events.
Yes.
But how to get a feel of that, how to live from that perspective is very challenging, because we are trained so early to create versions of bodies, versions of ourself. Yeah. And how do we keep opening it? Yeah.
When you were speaking of this process, it felt also that it's a state of balance. And balance is a notion that we have sometimes trouble with. It seems like to be in balance with and in harmony. I guess balance and harmony would be two living principles working together that create this capacity to be able to be part of this all coherent whole that can function together, and which is never fixed, like you said, which is never one identity, which can never be stop in time, which always has to continue its own, and that's balance, maybe, in a way. Maybe that's what is balance, instead of maybe thinking that balance is something that I'm gonna grab and hold and think that's balance. But
so, of course, any form of like physical balance is has to be. You have to befriend imbalance to find balance. It's a very immediate, with every step, with every moment of sitting. You know, even meditators for a long period of time are subtly, constantly finding like a dance in their relationship with the seat, gravity, and the vestibular system. So if we speak about physical balance, then our two directions of orientation in space, which gives us all directions, and gravity, which gives us a singular direction. And then imbalance, like physiological balance. I'm not sure which kind of balance that you're referring to, so.
More like a living principle, like homeostasis is one of the principles of balance that is part of us. I don't know if we are part of it, but it's part of us.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're like relating to gravity, for example. It's a force that is outside of us, but that we have to, at every single moment, be in a nonverbal, somatic, silent conversation with. Where am I in gravity? So whether I know it or not from a intellectual point of view, my organism is asking that question all the time. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? And the where am I question is a physiological question. It's like, where am I in relationship to water, to the toilet, to love, to novelty, to affection, and to gravity. So we're always in a here, where conversation. It's like that's a principle, like a deep, earliest principle. And we're here in gravity, and gravity gives every one of us like a place. So I think of it like a spiritual force of belonging that says, I have a place for you called here. And my here and your here are different. We each have our own heres. And then we're in a shared ground, a shared space. We're in a shared matrix. We're in a room right now. We're in a shared context. And that dance of here, where, actually gives us also presence, like a present moment. Here is not yesterday. It's a time question also, like the here is timeless and immediate at the same moment. It's intimate and vast simultaneously. And so balance, like how do I belong to that which belongs me, gravity. Gravity is already belonging me, but if I don't perceptually have a sense of it, I feel as if I never have support. I psychologically end up feeling like I never have support. But it's a gravity question, really. And so what was the gravity story of the caregivers at origin? Like how did they know how to be in their own gravity, be held while they were holding? Or were they like holding or like, you know, so the question is like, how do we more deeply resonate with that which we already are? Space, love, connection. And yet, because we are the way we are, we have a human social nervous system, we're often occupied more with social circumstance, and we're not having our first relationship strongly built enough. And the first relationship is heaven and earth. It's like, how do I know that? And then I'm with you, if I have deeply with me, but with me as with the larger earth body, spacious body, then I can like easily be with you. If those are kind of lost to me, and then I'm all with you, and then as soon as you get weird, I get weird because I don't know where I am. I'm not rooted and winged.
Those fundamentals are so important, and yet they are so difficult to find in the ordinary education.
In our modern life, they're hugely missing.
And concerning our nervous system, I'm quite fascinated, and also I have a very strong sense that the nervous system is a key in how we are going to move on in this adventure called life on Earth.
We have a nervous system that's meant for discovery. But we have a lot of trauma in the world now. A a lot. And part of it comes from so much dissociation and objectification. And so it creates this odd spiral of so many different traumatic moments that people are caught in a fight, flight, freeze dance. But the whole nervous system is built for such exquisite sensibility to be able to perceive far more profound connections. And so there is a piece like where we have to tend that social nervous system in the desire that every little nervous system of a mammal primate has for connection. Yeah. So we read the face. We read the face first and foremost. We read the sphincters of the face. And it's like I'm looking into the face, like, am I included? Will I be included? Will I be included? Or will you be enemy? Will I be, like, do I need to run? And so there's a piece where it's like our job also as any of us who are freeing the stream of life, the vitality of life, the vivification of being alive, then it's our job to help create a kind of welcome space. Yeah. And then also to help people find this like deep inner, oops, I keep tapping that microphone, a deep inner profound connection. Sometimes I think it's easier like in those people who have a chance to live in wilderness, there's a way in which one's own nervous system like gets so much more settled and porous. Like you're living amongst green ones. You're living in immense beauty almost all the time. I mean, of course, all the elements, they're strong forces and you have to relate. But I remember I lived for 3 months in the wilderness in Canada. I was so far in the wilderness. I was 110 miles from the nearest town that had electricity or a phone, in a tent, just like wild, wild, wild land. But after a while, I had been involved in the politics of fighting the Vietnam War, trying to get that stopped, marching in Washington, and environmental politics. And then I was in this like tune in, drop out kind of phase. So I was living in the wilderness, and at first I could feel there was still all this protest in me, but there was nothing to protest. I'd be in front of the tree like, and it was just like, I was seeing so much beauty, and one's nervous system tunes to like the speed of light, meaning the time that it takes for the sun to rise and to set and the moon to grow full and wane. And after a while, the whole sense of time, you're so slowed down, and you're in the time of bark and root and deep soil and the flow of the river and the sound of rain. And in it, then, there's a natural meditative, open state that comes. I feel like it prepared me to meet Emilie actually so incredibly well, because I kept having these experiences of the interconnectedness. I couldn't tell where my feet ended and the mountain began, and what the mountain I'm looking at that I think, oh my God, you're so beautiful, but wait a minute, where does my sight, where does it actually end? And the mountain was landing in my eyes. The moon was landing every full moon. It's landing in my eyes. It's thousands of miles away, but it's in my heart. And the tide dance with the moon is happening in me, and I can feel that, like that swelling, and then all of a sudden that deep, profound interconnectedness of this nervous system to actually be with that which is arising, simply put.
Yeah, beautifully said.